Hello, this is Todd Luck, and what do you get when you combine Tarzan, Mugambi, Nazis, Amazon warriors, and a mind-controlling jewel? Well, of course, you get Tarzan, Legion of Hate from Dark Horse Comics. This was part of the ongoing Tarzan series in the 90s. This was the first plot line for 1997 that ran in Tarzan 7 through 10, and we're going to be reviewing this, which is actually my favorite plot line of the Dark Horse run. But before we get started, a quick housekeeping note. So in my last video, I accidentally stated that all of the stories in the ongoing series from Dark Horse are set in the late 40s after the final Burroughs novel, which would have been Tarzan the Lost Adventures, which was a fragment that was completed by Joe R. Lansdale and published in the 90s. And that's been true of all the Dark Horse comics that I've reviewed that have been published in 1996. They were all set within that time frame, including the first plot line of the ongoing series. But now, from here on, we're going to find each plot line in this series is set in a different time period in Tarzan's life. And so this is actually set a few years before those other stories in 1943 during World War II. So with that little note out of the way, we can already see, just looking at the covers, how different these two plot lines are, right? The first plot line involved animals and fantastic monsters and all this stuff. It had painted covers. And on the cover here, we can very much see this is traditional comic art done by the interior artist. And this is a plot line that will involve human action and human drama. And so let's take a look at the covers, which are done by Christopher Schenck, who does the interiors, and he was also the artist on the first plot line. And this first cover is really interesting. It really just grabs you. Tarzan captive by these Amazons. Very intriguing stuff. The cover for part 2 has Tarzan fighting Nazis, and obviously this is taking some inspiration from the first appearance of Captain America, where Cap is punching Hitler, but it's not a swipe of it, it's not a tribute, it's just kind of getting that kind of same energy, and it works really well. The cover for part 3 has Tarzan fighting the head Amazon in a desperate struggle, and it's kinetic, it's intense, it's just a really, really cool image. And the fourth and final cover is the most intense of all, with Tarzan having succumbed to the mind control, and he is struggling with all of his might not to stab himself with this knife. You can see the blood running down from his hand as he's trying to prevent himself from committing suicide here. Very, very intense cover, killer image. And one of the cool things is that you can see the scar on his forehead. This only appears when Tarzan's very angry. And you can see it has a very particular pattern for the scar. And that is because the scar is in the shape of the Burroughs doodad. This was a symbol that Burroughs would oftentimes use to represent himself. So you'll see that on his novels, like his Tarzan novels, and you'll see that on officially licensed Edgar Rice Burroughs merchandise as well. The Tarzan comics from Malibu Simic International actually did this with the scar earlier in the 90s. And it's kind of cool Dark Horse kept this, except you notice that Malibu actually had the scar going down his cheek as well. And that was a little bit of artistic license because in the novel it's described as coming from an injury to his forehead. So that's probably why Dark Horse keeps it on his forehead. And so does the inclusion of the doodad scar mean that Malibu Simic and Dark Horse share the same continuity with Tarzan comics? I think that's up to the reader to decide. Dark Horse did use some of the same talent as Malibu Simic and did publish some of their leftover projects. And I'd like to think most Tarzan comics can coexist together. In my head canon, I'd like to think the works of Russ Manning and Joe Kubert and Marvel Comics, Malibu Comics, Dark Horse, and everyone else can, for the most part, coexist together. So when you open up the comics for this plot line, you're going to be greeted by this interior cover, and I assume this wonderful image is from Christopher Schenck, since he does the covers and the interiors for this plot line, and he is the same artist we had last time. We've got Alan Gross writing this time, and again, this is going to be lesser known talents who are just good, and Alan Gross has done some indie comics. He will go on to write the Tarzan comic strip in the newspapers, and it's inked by George Freeman, who, again, talented guy. He's done a lot of good work for different companies. Again, all these guys are good. They're just not well known enough to get their own Levi's commercial. So this plot line opens with a Nazi who is being hunted in the jungle by other Nazis. Unbeknownst to everyone, Tarzan is, of course, watching from the trees, always ever present and all knowing in the jungle. Tarzan and Mugambi decide to interfere and they try to stop the Nazis from killing the guy. And so Tarzan and Mugambi figure out that someone has gotten a hold of a mind control jewel that was last seen in the Burroughs novel Tarzan the Magnificent. And so as Tarzan is going through the jungle in absolutely glorious artwork, we get a flashback to that novel, and it's a really good summary. It tells you everything you need to know for this plot line with really glorious artwork. I love Tarzan in the jungle. I also love this absolutely iconic image showing Tarzan's fears of the Nazis taking over if they get a hold of this mind control power. And so the Lost City in Tarzan Magnificent also has Amazon warriors, and so Tarzan gets into conflict with those, and it's pretty darn awesome. And Mugambi has his own subplot in this story and plays a major role in the story, which is very rare in Tarzan comics. Normally in original stories, Mugambi doesn't even appear, so this is a real treat. And those are all strong elements for a good story, but what really sets this apart is the quality of the writing. And you open it up, and it's just this great narration that gives us Tarzan's point of view on things like war and humanity, and it feels like really good Burroughs narration, and it really does a great job of delving deeper into his themes and into his characters, and it's just really good stuff. And it does a really good job of defining each of its characters and giving them depth. So if you've never read anything with Tarzan in it, this is a perfect encapsulation of the character. It talks about how he normally likes to leave people to their own devices, and he doesn't consider himself a hero, but it's just in his nature to protect the victim. And also talks about his curious nature and how he has to know what's going on around him if he sees something strange like Nazis killing each other. Mugambi is here to give us the perspective of the Africans, and he also acts as kind of a fool to Tarzan, who's humorous when Tarzan's serious and can kind of see things that Tarzan oftentimes doesn't. And the Nazis and the Amazons are fleshed out as well. The Amazons have allied themselves with the Nazis. They have this bizarre culture where they only mate with white men, and they believe that the Nazis are going to take them to Germany where they think they're going to belong. And so there's never anything here to justify racism or being a Nazi, but we do understand, kind of the contempt they have for each other in the world, and just the kind of absurdity of trying to be racially pure. And the reason why the contempt and hate of the villains is so important is that's how the mind control jewel works. It uses hate to control its victims. And so we explore that in the villains, but we also explore kind of the unspoken tensions that happen between the heroes as well. And that is the tension between Africans and the white colonists who are occupying their countries. And in this case, it's set in Kenya in 1943, and we kind of have a foreshadowing of the uprising that will happen a little bit later. And we kind of ask the question, what will happen to Tarzan when that takes place? And while I've been talking about this wonderful writing that explores the complexity of its heroes and villains, let's not forget the artwork that I've been showing you and just what a great accomplishment it is to go from drawing animals and beasts and all this fantastic stuff to being able to make human drama and human characters fighting each other just as dynamic. And it requires being able to do distinctive characters, but also very expressive artwork. I mean, just look at the expressions on their faces. I mean, this smirk that's on Tarzan's face is priceless. It's just fantastic when you have an artist who has this type of range. And so, yes, I do highly recommend this plot line. It is available in trade paperback in the Dark Horse's Tarzan Omnibus, which is also available in Comixology. The single issues are also really cool. You get the letter column in the back, and one issue even has a text piece on the theme of Tarzan by Edgar Rice Burroughs himself, which is really neat. At the end, it says that Alan Gross is working on a Tarzan miniseries called Tarzan Primeval. They'll come out in 1998. Obviously, that miniseries most likely became Tarzan the Savage Heart, which you see over my shoulder, that came out in 1999. And we'll be taking a look at that eventually. To my knowledge, there's never been a story that followed up on the questions at the end of Legion of Hate about what would happen to Tarzan when the conflict happens in Kenya, but there is some hints at that in the epilogue found in the recent novel Tarzan Battle for Pellucidar. This has come out in recent years from Edgar Rice Burroughs Inc., and this is canon. And actually, there's several elements from Legion of Hate you will find in this novel. I'm not sure if that's coincidence or a tribute, but between Legion of Hate and Tarzan versus Predator, you're going to see some very familiar things in this novel. All right, that's it. So for my next retro review, when I get time to do that, we'll take a look at the next plot line in the Dark Horse Tarzan series, which is a weird one. It actually opens with him fighting the Phantom of the Opera. So like and subscribe for more videos. And until next time, see ya.